Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Siegecrafter Blackfuse 10-man normal in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Hello.
And this fight is really quite interesting, how it works. So you got like a little upper bit on a conveyor belt which has lasers and weapons, and only one person gets to see it. But
well, two people.
Well, two people I suppose, but yeah.
But it's fucking amazing encounter.
It's a very cool
I love this
encounter.
one. And it's actually quite challenging as well. So for this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, and a mixed DPS. There's no real composition that you need. So during this encounter, the main thing that you have to deal with is that the boss will frequently initiate an event that places weapons on an assembly line on the right hand side of the room on a conveyor belt, but this is out of the encounter area. You can just sort of see them rush past, and it's sort of like an indicator of what's coming up next, because the weapons will then move around towards the left hand side where they're placed on a similar looking conveyor belt. However, this one's much slower. Now, if the weapons successfully go through this conveyor belt without any of them being destroyed, they'll be used in the raid encounter, and you'll have to deal with all the abilities that these extra weapons give.
However, if you do kill a weapon on the conveyor belt, the rest of the weapons will be shielded, making them immune, guaranteeing them to be introduced into the encounter. So you can only really take one of the weapons away per conveyor belt session.
Now, if none of the weapons are killed on the conveyor belt, the boss will be buffed with a 90% damage reduction shield periodically, so you don't want this to happen, so you always need to send up one person to deal with the weapons. Now, weapons are spawned every 40 seconds or so, so people are going to be going up there a lot. Now, we're going to go through all the different weapons that you can get up there and what their abilities are if they manage to get into the encounter floor.
Now, the first of which we're going to talk about is the crawler mines. Now, these are fairly easy to deal with, that you can kill them quite fast. What they'll do, they fixate on a random player, and they can be rooted and stunned. However, after 1 minute, they become immune to this, and they gain a really large speed increase. What they'll do, if they hit the player, they'll do a massive raid-wide AoE and knock the player up. So what you need to do is that you do need to slow and root and stun these bastards and kill them very quickly.
Yeah, you need to prioritise these if they do become active in the encounter. Now, another weapon that can be thrown on this conveyor belt is the electromagnet. Now, once this is in play, it will do ticking damage on the raid and will start pulling all players towards this magnet. Now, what the magnet will also do is clear the room from any spinning saw blades, and we'll talk about how these work in a moment. And if the saw blades go through anyone as they're going towards the electromagnet, you'll also take damage from the saw blades.
Another weapon that you can have is a laser turret. Now, this will just spawn a laser that will chase down a player, and it will create patches of fire that are left behind in its wake. Now, the fire does tick harder the longer you're left in it, so make sure that you are moving out of these laser beams as they are shooting everyone around. So yeah, you just got to keep moving from them.
And it's quite easy to tell which player is being targeted by the laser, because it will actually give you a debuff that sort of indicates you are being chased by the laser. And the last possible weapon that you can get on this conveyor belt is the missile turret. Once this does make its way through the conveyor belt, it will create a shockwave of missiles that land on the outside of the room, and it will slowly start making circular ringed areas that will grow outwards. And when these sort of ring areas explode, they'll knock the player up in the air, and they'll also deal a large amount of damage to that player. This ability works quite similar to how the lightning storm works from the Protectors of the Endless encounter in Terrace of the Endless Springs. So when it does come in, just don't stand in the areas where it's marked.
Yeah, where you're gonna fucking die.
Yeah, just don't stand on top of it, but that one's relatively easy to deal with.
So you'll be asking us, well, I don't want any of these weapons to go through. How do we get rid of such weapons? Well, we're going to tell you. Now, on the left-hand side of the room where the conveyor belt is, you'll see a series of pipes. What you need to do is Mario jump into one of these pipes, and it'll transport you with a nice little... go through all the pipes, it's crazy, and you'll go onto the conveyor belt. Now, once you'll land, you'll gain a debuff that will last 1 minute. That will prevent you from going back on the conveyor belt. Now, this is the reason that you need 2 people, because, of course, the weapons come in every 40 seconds, so you need someone to be up there every 40 seconds, and with a 1 minute debuff, you can't go through the pipes again. So that's the reason that you need 2 people to be rotating. Now, on the conveyor belt, you need to decide what mob you really want to kill, while avoiding matter purification beams that instantly kill. There's insta-kill mechanics, and they're, so cool.
Now, once you have sort of made your way through all the beams, making sure that you don't get hit by them, and that you have killed your mob, right at the very end of the conveyor belt on the right-hand side will be a pipe that you can jump down. You jump in the pipe, and that will take you back into the encounter area. That's how you deal with the conveyor belt. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what weapon do you kill? Really, this is completely up to you guys. What we did, we always made sure that we killed the mines, because the mines we found were the biggest DPS loss, because you have to kill the mines, and players that are kiting them do lose DPS. and they can be quite frustrating to deal with generally, so we made sure we always killed these. However, if an electromagnet was there, we definitely killed that every single time. The electromagnet we found was the most irritating, and even more of a DPS loss than the mines, because you're always being moved and shifted around for quite a long period of time while they're active. Electromagnets are also, in ways, quite good. Towards like the middle of the encounter, or towards the end of the encounter, there's going to be a lot of saw blades active, and we'll talk about what the saw blades do in a minute during the encounter, and they can start blocking off pathways in the room, and the electromagnet will immediately clear all of them. So you might want to use the electromagnet towards the end of the fight, but generally what we did, we always killed the mines and the electromagnet. We always found them the most annoying. The laser turret isn't really a problem, you can just kite it, and the missile turret is really easy to avoid. You have so much time to avoid from it, even more than you do from the lightning storm from the Terrace of the Endless Springs. So those two aren't really that important. You just really need to decide yourself. One thing to keep in mind though, sometimes you can get the same weapon twice on one conveyor belt, so you could have like 2 mines.
Yeah.
Which means that you don't want to deal with all those mines, so you'd always take out the mine. Even if that means that you've got an electromagnet and 2 mines, you still want to kill the mines, because you don't want to deal with like so many of the same mechanic, because it could become a mess. However, if you did have, like, say, 2 laser turrets, that wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad. To be honest, it is something that you need to kind of work out, because, like, of course, different raid groups are going to find different, like, weapons easier to deal with. So if you're fine with electromagnets, do whatever the fuck you want, it's up to you. None of them will make it so the encounter's impossible. It's completely a decision up to you. We just think that the electromagnets and the mines are the most annoying.
And ultimately, it's just, as long as you kill one of them, that's the most important thing. Because if you don't kill one, then the boss gets the 90% damage reduction, and you have to deal with all the mechanics.
Yeah.
So that's really, really frustrating. Now, the best DPS to send up and actually kill these are probably your DPS that do the most damage. These mobs do have a lot of health, and a couple of times our DPS did struggle to get them, especially when we was on ults. Some of the ults did struggle to get on them. And also going into the pipe right at the very end, that's a little bit buggy. You need to make sure that you do jump directly into the pipe. If you don't, you'll just fall down and die. So try and land in the pipe. But that's how you deal with a conveyor belt, and hopefully you understand how all the different weapons work when they are played into the encounter area. So now we're going to move on and talk about what Siegecrafter does himself.
So he has an ability called Launch Saw Blade. We've been talking quite a lot about these saw blades. Now, this will target a random raid member, and after a short cast, he will fire a saw blade at them. Now, the saw blade does do a large amount of damage while spinning towards the player, and it will actually do quite a lot of damage to all the players that are hit along the path, and it will actually knock back and hit the last player, who, like, the initial target. So what you need to do at this point is make it so once you've identified who's going to get this saw blade on them, you need to create like a line of sight path between that player and the boss, so that when the saw blade does come in, it doesn't go through everyone and start like completely destroying them.
Now, it's kind of a good idea that when a new saw blade does come in, that the raid stands near the old one. And the reason why this is so that the saw blades stay relatively clumped. Not only does this help later with another mob that's introduced into the encounter, and we'll talk about that in a moment, it helps with just giving you far more room. It gives you more room to play around with the encounter, and it also means you don't have to use the electromagnet. Players just need to be really careful when it does come in, so they don't, get knocked into old ones, sort of creating a chain of knockbacks that eventually kill you.
Now, the other ability that Siegecrafter Blackfuse has is an Electrostatic Charge. Now, this is the tank debuff. It will do a large amount of nature damage upon application, and it increases the damage you take by this ability significantly. Now, you just want to kind of taunt on 3 stacks, and to be honest, you do need to use your cooldowns on the 3rd application of this spell, because it really, really hurts.
Yeah, if you're using tanks that have ways of avoiding magical damage, you want to use those magic damage reduction or avoidance abilities around the 3rd stack, because it does hurt. If you're going to go higher than 3 stacks, then yeah, you need to start using big cooldowns. Now, that's all Siegecrafter will do himself, really.
He literally sends up saw blades and does a tank debuff.
Yeah, that's pretty much all he does. However, throughout the encounter, automated shredders spawn. Now, these shredders' main ability is something called Overload. After a short cast, the shredders will do damage to all players in the room. However, it won't damage anyone on the conveyor belt, thankfully, and will buff the shredder, increasing its damage dealt by 30%, and this ability does stack, so the shredder needs to die very, very quickly. Not only will he do this, he'll also do an ability called Death from Above. He'll propel himself into the air and target a random player. When he slams back down on the ground, he'll deal 500k damage to all players in the impact zone, so it's borderline one hit.
Yeah.
You can avoid this ability though, so when it does happen, if you do everything right and you move out of it, no one will take any damage. Now when he does land, he does actually stun himself for 5 seconds and will start taking 200% extra damage.
Yeah, so it's at this point you really
at this
want to
point
lay
you
into
then
him.
want to switch to him and start doing damage to him. However, as we mentioned previously about the sword blades, they're not bad, they actually help you, because they will do damage to the shredder, and not only will the sword blades do damage, the missile turrets, which is like the shockwavey turrets, lightning storm bullshit, the bomb explosions, but they should never happen anyway, and the fire that's left from the laser turrets, they will all do damage to this shredder, and that's how you want to kill this shredder. So this is the main reason why you have the sword blades so stacked right at the very start of the encounter, because they last for the whole encounter. If you've got like 3 of them stacked up really close, you can tank the shredder so he's inside all those sword blades, and it will completely and utterly melt him. The shredder dies ridiculously quick while he's on top of all these sword blades. So that's really what you want to do with the shredders. The raid should never have to hit him, because the raid actually do less damage to him anyway. He has like a natural damage reduction to all players, but when he does land after his stomp, players should switch to him if he's not already dead, because they do get the 200% extra damage done to him. The most important thing you need to do with these shredders, however, is keep them away from the boss. If they're within 35 yards of the boss will actually start healing them, and he does heal them for a large amount. So that's why you'll see that the raid is stood so far away from the boss, so that all the sword blades are far away from the boss, so you can put the shredder on top of the blades immediately. Now the rate in which these shredders spawn is pretty much the exact same rate in which one tank will receive 3 stacks of the Electrostatic Charge. So you really want to just taunt swap on 3. When you're not tanking, go pick up the shredder, tank it on top of the shit, kill it, come back, and rinse and repeat. That's all you need to do. And that's pretty much how that works the whole time. Now towards the end of the encounter, the whole room is completely covered in shit. There's fire everywhere, there's sword blades everywhere, and it can become slightly more difficult to move from missile turrets, you know, the shockwave ability, lightning storm thing. So while that is going on, it's important that, you know, players do open their eyes and do try and play to their best. This is when you might want to use an electromagnet just to get rid of all the blades, but generally having them all up, if your DPS is like relatively high, you shouldn't have a problem doing this encounter, especially if the boss never gets the 90% damage reduction shield. You shouldn't have a problem killing them. But it's a fucking amazing encounter.
It is so cool.
Love it. It's my favourite encounter, even though I said FATBOSS, but this guy is still just as good.
And you said Garrosh was as well.
And Garrosh as well. But
there's lots of good encounters.
There's lots of good encounters in this instance.
Beautiful.
But yeah, that's more or less how you deal with them. Yeah, good boss.
So thank you guys for watching. If this guide helped you out, then please do give us a like. It helps us out significantly. And make sure to comment, rate, and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see other 10-man normal guides by FatBoss, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now. And that'll take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.